Naaman was like any powerful leader of his day or ours. He commanded allegiance and obedience. He was used to getting his own way. He could have been Premier of Ontario. People came to him. He did not need to go to people. So he must have been pretty desperate for a cure to his skin disease, for him to go to his king and beg the king of Aram to let him go to Israel for a cure. The king loved him and sent him off to Israel with a letter of introduction, much wealth and gifts of finery. He bore a request from one king to another king. Please heal this much loved commander. All the pomp, circumstance, and the trappings of power went with him on his journey to northern Israel. On his arrival, though, the king became convinced that this was a political ploy, perhaps to embarrass or show him up as being less powerful. The request was that he help cure a man. His response was a suspicion that the king of Aram was trying to pick a quarrel with him. The nameless king of northern Israel is saved from creating a major diplomatic scandal by his prophet, who simply says, "Don't get upset. Send the commander to me for healing." And that, of course, is where the commander's sense of power and importance are challenged, as instead of meeting a very important prophet, he meets some of the prophet's workers, lesser mortals, who tell him to go and wash in the River Jordan 7 times. You can almost hear the bluster and protest of this powerful man who's used to all the trappings of power accompanying him wherever he goes, as he realizes that these people are just the messengers. They're just the little workers. Well, somehow the commander's servants talk him into giving it a try, and the commander emerges from the dirty waters of the Jordan with the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Now, some of the story sounds a bit like a comedy drama acted out on the stage with much over exaggeration of words and movements, but underneath it all flows a sense of unreality. What a surprise then when the pomp, circumstance, and the trappings of power fail, but the intent of the story is achieved by simply accepting the advice given by the messengers to go and bathe. Now, we read this story today in the context of Remembrance Day. Who are these messengers? Certainly, they do not come necessarily from the powerful and mighty of the land. The first messenger might be the young slave girl. She certainly was of low status and really did not have much to offer besides her willingness to serve Naaman's wife. And to do that, it seems fairly well, as she was comfortable enough in the situation to speak of her master's skin condition. She did not offer anything very profound other than her simple belief that there was a prophet in her homeland who could cure this type of disease. She would not have understood the nature of this disease. She would not have understood the political and diplomatic challenges of having Naaman seek a cure in the northern kingdom. She simply knew that there was a prophet who had a cure. Or was the messenger Elisha? Known as a man of God, Elisha was the prophet of whom the young girl spoke. He had been called by God to do great things, and he was doing them every day, it seemed. Hearing of his king's dismay and consternation at being asked to see that Naaman was healed, Elisha simply said, "Send it to me and I'll look after it." In fact, the healing was so simple. Apparently, it was a disease well known in Israel that Elisha did not even feel it necessary to meet Naaman or get directly involved in the healing. He simply sent the messengers with the process to be followed in order to be cured. Elisha was a great prophet, could have let his king remain troubled, but instead he took in an outsider and offered him treatment. Or was the messenger Naaman himself? Once he got over being incensed at not being treated with the deference he felt was his due, Naaman had to learn that God acted not through money and gifts, but in the willingness to be cleansed after accepting the simple advice to wash in the water that was near at hand, even if it was dirty and from an insignificant river. We're not used to the powerful giving in to such teaching and wisdom, but it can and has happened. For Naaman, it brought healing to his life. The many wars in which Canada has found itself were wars where one powerful leader sought to dominate other powerful leaders. The result was always suffering and loss until peace was restored and common sense prevailed. What is clear, at least to me, is that wars were never won and peace never prevailed by just pomp, circumstance, and the trappings of power. It took enough people willing to say, let's stop this and wash ourselves not in blood, but in the waters common to each of us and all of us. In our story, it's interesting that the special power was not found in the young girl, nor the king, nor Elisha, nor Naaman himself, but in the water. For the Hebrew people hearing this story, the idea of Naaman going into the river to be cured was perfectly natural. For in their tradition, God and water were often synonymous with the power to heal. It is God that is in the water, so that this story is one that tells us that the power to heal is not found in the high places of power, but in the brokenness of life. That is in the places where we find God, and that is most likely in the muddy river right in front of us, not some distant, clear flowing river. I believe that we see that brokenness in the elementary support workers forced into a strike with a potentially punishing consequences beyond the current inability to feed their families and to pay their rent. And equally in a government that demands the removal of the threat of a strike while at the same time passing draconian legislation and invoking the infamous notwithstanding clause to show just how strong they are and what bullies they can and will be for any employment group that demands fair pay for critical work. These workers care for our children and grandchildren, yet they must go to food banks to feed their children. For Christians, that brokenness is symbolized in the cross and the life of the cross. For Jesus, the pomp and circumstance and the trappings of power of Rome and its empire would not come close to the power of God. When they ordered death, God's response was life. God's people are not people with special power or status or money, but those who accept and recognize that God is the power of life, and nothing can separate us from the love of God that has promised us that life. It's hard to remember war without seeming to advocate for it. Hard to embrace peace when the world is still at war and torn apart by those in power who deny the elements of life and the protection of human rights. It would be easy to become cynical, yet that would deny our role as people of the resurrection. We believe that new life is possible. It may take a struggle in terms of labor relations and the removal of despots who destroy whole nations, but that is our work. Beginning today, for example, the Arab Republic of Egypt will host the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference with a view to building on previous successes and paving the way for future ambition to effectively tackle the global challenge of climate change. We've done a terrible job with that, and we've done a good job as well. No one is ready to give up hope yet. This conference has met 27 times over the years and will continue to struggle for responsible stewardship of this world. That is how we as Christians, and the church is very present in this conference. That's how we as Christians witness to the love of God and the renewal of God's world. Perhaps it is by entering the muddy and murky waters of this world that we too, with all of God's creation, will be healed. Amen.